Okay, welcome to Class 11 of Introduction to Flash Animation. And today we're going to talk more about action scripting. I want to go over just a couple of things real fast. These are super important for us to understand as we head towards the final project. So I'm going to take us back to October 11th, where I have this link for examining the ActionScript concepts. And when I click on that link, it downloads this PowerPoint presentation, which I'm launching. I want you to make sure to review this with some frequency because it takes you through all of the concepts that we're studying for this second half of our semester. That being said, I'm going to zip through some of it and focus on other parts. We know that ActionScript is similar to JavaScript. We know that we can get to the action panel using the keyboard shortcut F9. We want to start with some things that are fairly new to us. We know all about instances and how they work. We haven't really taken too much of a look at linkage, but we will. Properties. Remember, they're comparable to adjectives, and they're always set up like this. You have your object, you have your property, you have your assignment operators, and you have your values. Regardless of the specifics of the property, that's the way properties are set up. Methods. Methods are always set up like this. You have your object, you have your method, you have your parameters that are encapsulated inside of your parentheses and your semicolon to end the sentence. Some methods like play don't have any parameters. Other methods like, let's find a method here, like go to and play will have a parameter. For example, this parameter is the word start, and we see start has quotes around it. That means it's referring to a word, it's referring to a label. Okay? So we have properties, we have methods. Variables. We know that variables are containers. Okay? And the first thing that is important for us to remember when it comes to variables is that you create a variable by using the word var. Okay, so we'll say var space and then the name of the variable. You don't have to say var equal, you just say var space and the name of the variable. Functions. Functions are key for us to understand how to program inside of Flash. The primary purpose of the function is to have a series of actions that are available on an as-need basis. These functions sit and lie in wait, and they're just waiting to be called. Okay? So the main thing about functions is we have to declare the function, and then that's really all that the function has to do. It's the event handler that invokes the function. Okay? So here's an example of how a function is constructed. We have a function, then the function name, and sometimes inside of the parentheses, if the function is specific for a specific type of event, like let's say this function is always triggered by a mouse event, then it would say function name event mouse event, right? If it was a keyboard event, it would say function name event keyboard event. And then you have all of the actions that occur within that function. The function block always looks like this. Okay? Moving on. What invokes the function? The most common way to invoke the function is to target an object. And in this case, the object is the home button. Add an event listener. And then specify what the event listener is. In this case, it's a mouse event.click. And then, comma, call the function. This is the two parts of the fundamentals of setting up basic programs that we have to understand in order to create and complete our remaining work. As I already said, event handlers are the objects that call the function. So for example, here it says function play movie, and that's going to be triggered by event mouse event. Void is information you need in there, but it basically just means that this function is not going to return any value. Okay, and then the arguments or the actions within the function are stated between the curly braces. But then what happens is that the event listener is constructed to play that function. And in this case, what we see, we have a button, and we add an event listener to that button, and the event listener is a mouse event. Specifically, it's a click, and then comma. This is where it's calling the function. So somewhere else in this movie, there'd have to be a function called play movie in order for that to be called. Okay, so those basic concepts, the concept of functions and the concepts of event handlers, are the two primary elements that we have to keep in mind and remember as we move forward. Okay, so what are we supposed to do for homework as of midnight tonight? The good news is that all you have to do is have downloaded this Homework 5 start file and the accompanying instructions. That assignment isn't due until next week. Okay, so you've got a whole nother week for that assignment. And I know that some people have already completed it. I've seen some questions on the message board about it. So today I'm going to walk you through how that project is constructed, and then show you some other projects as well. Okay, so today the primary focus is seeing how we incorporate that action scripting into the basic movie. That being said, I'm going to open up Flash after I put a little marker in here, and we'll say Homework 5 in detail. Okay, we're looking at Homework 5, and we see when I play Homework 5, Testing. Can you hear me now? Hello? Okay, I don't know how that happened. I didn't see that I clicked on anything. So, okay. So, what was the? I'll just backtrack a teeny bit here. So basically, we know that the dog tab, the cat tab, the flower tab, and the Porsche tab, each one of these, when I double click on them, has a label on the inside: out, over, and selected. Okay? So those labels those labels are important to remember because we're going to be using them in our action script. So I'm going to go to my Actions panel, and I'm going to select the first frame of my timeline on my Actions layer, and I'm going to walk you through what these different lines say. So anytime, of course, we're typing into the Actions interface, into the Actions panel, we'll get a variety of import elements that Flash automatically puts in. So let's not worry about those. First thing we see is that how does this program initialize? Basically, remember, when any Flash program launches, there's an initial state, and that's called just initialization. So we see there, remember, we have the MC Dog tab, Cat tab, Flower tab, and Porsche tab. The MC Dog tab is set up so it goes to and stops on the selected frame. The selected frame is where the frame looks like, let's see, let's get in there. The selected frame is where the frame looks like this. Okay? So that's how the movie starts. We see that the dog tab is already selected because it's the first tab. Okay? And then all of the rest of the tabs are set to the out position, which resembles what we see here on the stage. Okay? And then MC content is started on the dog, which is the first frame of that movie clip. So these are our initial states. Then we go through this process of setting up a bunch of listeners, setting up a bunch of functions. And the first one and all of the ensuing functions are set up the same way. We create a function called the dog over listener, and it doesn't matter what it's called. That's, you name the function according to what the purpose of the function is. So we see function dog over listener, and it's set EVT : mouse event. EVT or EVENT are the same in terms of writing out what type of function, writing out the parameters of the function. And when I say parameters, I mean what's going to trigger this function. So function dog over listener, it's a mouse event that's going to be triggering it. And then we have a conditional statement. And the important thing to notice here is just the construction of the conditional statement and what it does. Basically, we start with an if. And as soon as we have an if, anything that follows the if is going to be in parameters, inside of parenthesis. So it says, if the MC Dog tab dot current label equals selected. Now that's something new. What is this current label? Current label is a Flash property that's referring to any labels on any timelines. Okay, so we're saying look inside of the MC Dog tab movie clip and use the current label property to determine what label is being selected. So it says if MC Dog tab dot current label equal selected. Now equal, what does that mean? Well, this is what's called a comparison operator. A comparison operator is what we use in conditional statements to see what we're looking at. So what's the difference between a comparison operator and an assignment operator? Assignment is setting the value to something. Comparison is looking to see what the value is. So we're asking a question. What is the MC Dog tab's current label right now? And then we're saying, well, if it's selected, then make the MC Dog tab stay on that selected label. If it isn't currently selected, then go to the over label. Okay? Basically, it's saying it's really an either or. It's either going to be selected, in which case we're going to keep it on selected, but if it isn't selected, then make sure it's resting on the over state. Okay? Then we have another one that says the same thing essentially. If the current label is selected, go to and stop on selected, else go to and stop on out. Now, how can it be doing both of these things? Well, because they're functions. So it's only when the function is called that it does anything, right? And then we see there's a third selector, which is a third function, which is a little different. This is when you click. This is where we have the action. When you click on the dog tab, go to and stop on the selected tab of the dog frame, and on that content movie clip, which is where all the pictures are, go to and stop on the picture of the dog. But for all of those other movie clips, all those other tabs, go to and stop on the out state. So basically, this is setting it up that when we roll, we have a function that determines what we do when we roll over the dog tab, what we do when we roll off of the dog tab, and what we do when we click on the dog tab. Now, of course, we need various event handlers to trigger those functions. So I'm going to go way down to my event handlers down here, and we see that I have 3 different event handlers that are going to trigger those functions. We have the dog tab that is going to be listening for the mouse over event. And notice that I constructed this differently than in the written handout, because this is a shorthand way of creating a string. Instead of typing, let me pull up my document because I don't remember these things off the top of my head. So let me just pull this up and go right here. So going down, 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 down. Okay, so instead of typing mouse event dot mouse underscore over, right? So instead of doing mouse event dot mouse event mouse, no, it's dot mouse underscore over. Instead of doing all of that, and by the way, when you do type in mouse event dot, it brings up a list of the different mouse options that you have. But instead of typing all of that out, I could have just typed in mouse over, but it has to be exact just like that. Anyway, let's get back to the task at hand, which is understanding what's triggering those 3 functions. So we have the event listener that's listening for the mouse over, and when we roll over that element, it triggers the dog over listener, which puts the tab on the over state, puts the movie clip of the dog into its over state, which looks one way. Then we have the tab listening for the mouse out when you roll off of the tab, and then it triggers the dog out listener, which puts the tab on the next event, on the next state, so it's a different look. Finally, we have the mouse dog tab listening for when it's clicked on, in which case it actually triggers the movement of the content tab to go to a different picture, sets all of the other tabs to their out state, and sets the one that's being clicked on to its selected state. That's really the entire code. But you see there's all this other code involved. Well, really, it's copies of the same 3 functions 3 times. We have to do that same thing for the cat over listener, for the cat out listener, for the cat click listener, and we have to make sure that, for example, the cat click listener is going to be, when we click on that, it's going to be the MC cat tab that goes to and stops on selected, right? But it's really the same functionality. The only problem from a design perspective is that we've got 144 lines of code for something as simple as this. So basically what I'm saying here is that there's really nothing particularly elegant about that. It's all a matter of understanding. It's just a matter of understanding how this is structured, so you know what you can do in much more involved and much more robust, complex game environments. The main thing that we want to understand by constructing this code is how we construct conditional statements, how we create multiple listeners to handle a variety of different events. That being said, I can show you that when I woke up this morning, I was thinking, gosh, there's got to be a much simpler way to do this same project. And basically, what you see here is my version of doing this project in 17 lines of code instead of 144. And I basically am using what's called event.target.enabled to disable all of the buttons that disable the button that is currently selected and keep all of the rest of the buttons enabled. And then also setting the button that has been selected, setting it to a different property so it looks different. And then I can essentially create an event listener that responds to the click and runs a single function. Okay? I can also create a second event listener that would run a second function that would make it different for the overstate and for the outstate. So instead of having 12 functions, I could have 3 functions. I didn't get that far, but you can see that this operates pretty much the way we'd expect it to operate. See, I roll over it. I changed those into buttons as well instead of movie clips, but I click on cat and that color changes. The only thing I haven't figured out, well, I have figured it out now just by talking, but before class, as far as I got, was I didn't enable these to change back to having not been selected, so it looks like it's kind of like the visited state of these different tabs. But you see all of the tabs work properly. All of the functionality is still there in a much more simple environment. And I'm going to post this file to our class site just for people to examine so you can see how there are several different ways that you can approach it. Okay, so that's all we really need to know about homework number 5. As I said, homework number 5 is not due until November 8th. Okay, now we're going to go on. I'm going to talk a little about I'm going to talk about sound a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the various 4 states of sound that we've looked at before. So I'm going to put a little marker in. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little about sound. And the other day I made my little homage to the San Francisco Giants. And I'll just show it to you for a second, and then I'll talk to you about how it's constructed. So I'm going to click on play, and we hear. So we hear the little music. I click on play ball, and we see a tween. The pitcher is waiting. The batter is waiting. I click on my controls, which are this baseball and this baseball bat. Pitcher winds up, delivers, and the batter swings way late. Try it again. Ooh, that time he swung in the right time, but he missed it. Try one more pitch. Let's see. He strikes. He misses it. Okay, there's some other things that I have added to the final version of this project, but I can probably show you how to do that as I go along here. So let's take a look at how this project is constructed. First thing that's important is, as I've said from the very beginning, you want to make sure to, I'm trying to find how I can move this. This is one thing about screen sharing. The things that are simple to do become a little bit more challenging. There we go. Okay, my timeline. I have a background layer. I have a stadium layer. I have a batter layer, a pitcher layer, a set of controls, a sound layer, and finally an actions layer. So my background, I have two different backgrounds, and we can start with that. We'll see that what happens when I scrub my playback head. Oh, well, we're looking at that here. What happens when I scrub my playback head is essentially we have a cross dissolve. Okay, cross dissolves are very easy to accomplish. Basically, I have two pictures. In this case, the stadium picture that shows up later has its alpha set to 0, and it stretches out, and so it zooms in and fades in. Whereas the background layer starts in full opacity and it fades out. So when you have the two of those together, you basically get a cross dissolve, right? Okay. Next thing we've got is we've got the batter. The batter is not present until here where he starts fading in. Okay? And he goes along with the pitcher, and we see first the batter fades in, and then the pitcher fades in. And these are basic motion tweens. Okay? So we've got those four now. Then we have our controls. Now, it shows that the controls are there from the very beginning, but actually what I do with ActionScripting is I hide them until the end. And the reason that I need them on the stage at the beginning is if they're not on the stage at the beginning, if I write any action script that talks about them, then the program won't work, and I'll get the program will just loop and will generate a null reference error. That's null, N-U-L-L. So it's a null reference error. So sometimes I have to put elements on the stage before I need them, only because the action script needs to refer to those elements right away if the action script is on the first frame, which is where I have it. So basically, I have those elements on the first frame, but actually I've set their opacity to 0. They don't show up until somebody clicks on this play ball button. Okay? Finally, on the sound layer, I have a sound that I had in my library. Right over here, we've got the, let's see, I think it's this one. Yep. So I drag that to the timeline, and then I can use the edit sound envelope to control that sound. Okay? And now let's take a look. Well, there's a couple other things we want to look at first. I want to go look at the pitcher. So here's our pitcher. let me put the keyframe way out here. Here's my picture. I double click, and we see the picture has its own animation, right? It's a frame-by-frame animation. And I see that there's my picture's animation. I added another movie clip into the picture's movie clip. So what does the picture's movie clip consist of? It's got this graphic, and it's also got this other movie clip, which is another copy of this baseball that I created a motion tween with, so it flies in. Then I have an action right at the end, and basically this action just says stop. I might want that action to, instead of saying stop, say go to and stop on frame 1, so the picture is back in position. So I could just go over here and change this to go to and stop 1. And that's the frame number. If I had a label there like we saw in the homework 5 file, I could have put the label in quotes. Okay? So this is how this picture's movie clip is constructed. Let's see how the batter's movie clip is constructed. I'll select the batter. He's locked. I'll unlock him. I'll double click on the batter to get into the batter's timeline. And essentially I see another frame-by-frame animation with an action at the end. And this one, since I didn't want him to be swinging at the end, I already sent it back to the stop frame. We go back to main scene. I test it now. I click on play. We see that there are no controls over here as I explained. I click on play ball. We see the pan. We see our controls. If I click on pitch, he winds up, he delivers, and he gets back into, they both get back to their start states because their timelines say to do that. Now we see that there's a big lag in here, so I have to click here and then click right away on the bat. Now this is, like I said, this is not a fully developed game. This is just an example of how you would construct a complex project that has some interaction, well, not really complex, fairly simple actually, but how you construct a simple interactivity project. It almost always involves having a bunch of cast members that have their own timelines, and then we have to, of course, control those timelines. So speaking of controlling the timelines, let's see what we have on the Actions panel. On the Actions panel, I see that I've set up let me pin this tab and then take a look at these layers for a second. Let's move these things around, get this out to here, and just lock the backgrounds. Okay, so on the Actions panel, I see I have button pitch, which is the ball. Yes, the ball. That's button pitch right here. I have its alpha set to 0 when it starts, so we don't see it. The same thing with button hit, which is the bat. I have its alpha set to 0. So when we start this, we don't see those controls yet. Then I have the play ball button, which is button start game. I have its alpha set to 1, which is full opacity. So we do see that at the beginning. Okay? And then we have the pitcher and the batter. Their timelines are set to be waiting on frame 1. They're stopped. So it says this, which stands for this timeline. On this timeline, there's a movie clip called Pitcher, and we've set Pitcher to be set at a state of stop. The same thing is true with the batter. And then we're stopping the main timeline as well. Then, as we've seen in every project, we have to have our functions and we have to have our event handlers. In this case, I have 3 functions. I have the pitch function, which essentially is triggered by a mouse event, and it makes the pitcher play its timeline. I have the bat function, which is triggered by a mouse event, and it has the batter play its timeline. And then I have the start game function, and of course, if I was going to put this in a logical order, I would take this off and put it as the first function, because that's really how it runs. I have the start game function, which basically, when you click on this button, it sets the alpha of the ball and the bat to be fully visible. It sets the alpha of the play ball button to be invisible, and it starts the main timeline. So it allows us to cross-dissolve and get to the frame where we have our pictures. Right? So those are our three functions, really straightforward stuff. There's nothing tricky about this. And of course, we have our event handlers. We're listening for mouse event clicks on all of these events, and we're triggering those three functions. And that's how this game is constructed. Now, what does this have to do with sound? Here's what it has to do with sound. If I've got this sound here set to event, because I was talking to you about sound sync. If I have this sound set to event, even though this sound lasts for 7 seconds times 30, 240 frames, it plays in its entirety even if I only had one frame, because when you have sound sync set to event, it plays the entire sound timeline regardless of how many frames you've got on your stage. Okay? What about these other sounds? Well, I've got the crowd cheer here. So I'm going to go into the baseball player, into the batter, and I'm going to, actually before I do that, I'm going to create another library element. So here's my MC batter. I'm going to right-click on him and duplicate him, and I'm going to call it MC batter hits. Okay? So MC batter hits. He's a different batter. Okay? I double-click on him, and I'm in his timeline. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I'm going to name these layers to make sure that it's very clear. It's always important to keep track of your elements by naming them. And I will now add a sounds layer. So I have my batter. I have my action script that simply sends the batter back to the first frame. I'm going to now examine where the batter hits the ball, or would hit, and be right there on frame 50. So I'm going to take this sound layer's keyframe and move it to frame 50. Then I'm going to click on this sound to hear it. Okay. And I'm going to drag it to the main timeline. So now when I replay this movie clip, okay, piece of cake. Very nice. Next thing I want to do is I need a ball for him to hit, right? So I'm just going to set the ball and drop it right there on the same frame, because that ball is going to be delivered by the pitcher. And if he swings right at the right time, it should look fairly seamless well, the ball has seams, but it should look fairly seamless if I get the ball just in the right place. So since I already have this MC ball, I'm going to put it on this ball layer on that keyframe right there. And I'll drop it here on the stage, and I'll resize it. Okay. Move it in place using my arrow keys. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could even add a little filter to it to blur it, like that. Okay, so now when I play it, okay, and obviously the ball can't stay there, so I would right-click. I would choose Create Motion Tween, and on this last frame, I'd have the ball going out this way, and use my selection tool to bend that path of flight If it's a really well-hit ball, we might see it go something like that. And it should also get smaller over there as it disappears. So now we see it look something like this. Okay. So now that's looking more like what would actually happen in a game. And the way I can set this up is I can control it. So create a conditional statement that might have some variable involved with if the batter swings at the right time, then substitute MC batter hits for MC batter, and we'd see that animation. So basically, when it comes to the sound synchronization, we're using the event sound on both of those scenarios. If I wanted to just have the sound end right at the end of the timeline, we'll use that MC batter hits as an example. What I would do is I would select that sound and change the synchronization to stream. So it would be much faster, and it would be a totally different feel to it. Okay, and that's how much we would hear. We could extend the timeline to hear a little bit more. The only advantage to doing something like that is the sound doesn't have to totally download onto the player's, onto the end user's computer in order to make this work. The other advantage to the difference between stream and sync is stream is much better for synchronizing sounds to animations, because you can hear it as you play. If we had this set to event, we would not hear that at all. Okay, so the difference between sync and event is also that when you have it set to sync, you can actually scrub the playback head and hear the sound as it's playing. So those are the two main things that you want to ensure. And the other thing that you can do is you can have this background music which might be looping. Let's say we had this background music looping. So I play this. I'm going to put I have to get that second batter in here to make this all work. So I'm going to take that second batter. I'm going to put him on his own layer. And I'll go to my library. And I'll drop him in the same place as the batter is hitting, make him a bit smaller, so he's the same size as the batter, more or less. But since he's the guy who gets hits, maybe he's a little bit bigger. And I'll put him just, well, I have to leave him there because I'm going to need to call him. So I'm going to set his alpha to 0. Okay? So I'm going to go to the timeline, click on Actions, and when this is initialized, oh, we have to name him. We have to give him an instance name. So let me hide batter this other batter so I can see this batter, and we'll call him hitter. Okay. So I select this first frame, go to Actions, and in my initialization here, I can say this dot hitter dot stop, or I can use this little picture right here, insert a target path, and there's my hitter. I click on OK, and it sets this part of it up for me. It even makes it a little more complicated of a read, but I don't make any mistakes when it comes to my syntax. Okay, so this dot hitter dot stop, and also this dot hitter dot alpha dot 0, right? This dot hitter dot alpha equal 0, and take out those parameters. Okay, so we've set up a method which keeps him from playing. That's a verb, and we've set up a property to make him invisible, that's an adjective. Now, what we also want to do is we're going to create a new event handler, and it's going to be called button Homer and Homer. Okay, now we have to create a button that triggers a function. Well, the function is going to be this function, except it's going to be function Homer, not mower. And it's going to say this dot hitter dot play. So we're going to play the hitter's timeline. Remember, we have a hitter that's invisible, and we also have to make him visible. So this function is also going to create this hitter's alpha, right? Equal 1. Okay, so we have a function now that makes this, and see, we have to do one other thing. We have to make the other batter alpha equal 0. So we have to hide the other batter, show this batter, and that's what this function is going to do. Now all I have to do is create a button called Homer, and we're going to put an Easter egg in here. So we're going to go Insert, New Symbol, click on Symbol Type, change it to Button, click on OK. I'm going to take my oval tool, just make a little oval, and simply select the keyframe from the up state and drag it to the hit state. It is now an invisible button. We see it's called symbol 1. I'm going to rename it, we'll just call it Homer. Okay? And I'm going to drop that on my controls page. And let's put it on this guy over here in the stand. No, let's put it behind the batter. And we see it shows up as this translucent blue oval. That's perfectly fine. We have to name it, though, according to what we called it in our event handler. So in the event handler, we called it BTN Homer. We also need to make it, well, it's already invisible, so we don't have to do anything to its visibility. That's obvious. Okay, so here's my controls. I go out to frame here, and there's that button, and we call it BTN Homer. So I give it an instance name, BTN Homer. Now, let's see what happens. Uh-oh. Cannot access property of null object reference. Okay, let's see. So I didn't, and that now it's looping. So what did I misdo here? BTN Homer, and go to my timeline and open my actions panel, and hitter, this guy's the hitter, right? That's all good. Function pitch, function bat, function Homer. This dot batter. Oh, is the other guy named batter? Let's see. Yes, it is. This dot batter. This dot hitter. This dot hitter. BTN Homer. Mouse event click Homer. Function Homer. So this matches that. That's good. BTN Homer matches. This is the tricky part here. Oh, what's this out here? Unpin this. Just a stop action. Okay. Oh, I see. null reference object because this button was put on the wrong timeline. And as I said earlier, I see that null reference object message because this button is not at frame 1. It's not on the timeline when this function is calling it. So I have to click it off there. I have to select this controls layer and paste it. And then when we get to here, let's move it right there. And now we should get this to work. Okay, so that null reference object layer, even though I knew all about it, I got bit by it because I accidentally put that button on the last frame instead of on the first frame. Okay, I test it now. Click on play. Pitch. He swings. Misses. Okay, this time I'm going to click here and then click here, and now we're getting an overlapping of sound. So we're going to finish this up with the sound issue, and I'm going to go into that timeline of that second batter, and I'm going to put another sound layer here, and I'm going to call it sound stop. And I'm going to drag that playback head out to right here, and I'm going to select that layer and go where it says sound. I'm going to, let's see, it's baseball crowd, and I'm going to set its sync to stop. So this is what's important about knowing the different synchronizations. The sound synchronization stop is going to stop that sound from playing on the main timeline. Okay, test it one more time. Click on play. I click on this. I click here. So you see, it stopped that other sound from playing. So those sound synchronization methods are important for you to keep in mind. So in conclusion, we've looked at our ActionScript. We reviewed our PowerPoint presentation ActionScript. I'd like you to make sure to download that and keep it handy. We have examined our Homework 5, the complications of the ActionScript within that, and essentially how we are creating a total of 3 functions repeated 4 times in order to get the functionality that we need. It uses conditional statements, if-else statements. Important to examine the structure of an if-else statement. And then we also see that at the bottom we have our event listeners that trigger those various functions. I showed you an easy way to do this, which has almost the exact same functionality in 17 lines. And I'll post that to the website. And finally, I showed you how the structure of a game that's a fairly simple game is put together involving various individual movie clips that have their own timelines that get triggered by controls, and then we use our action panels to trigger those elements. And then we, of course, have functions and event handlers behind the whole thing. So for next week, all you want to do is you want to make sure that you really are familiar with the ActionScript. You want to finish that Homework 5 start file because that is due as of next week. So that's a wrap for today. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you next week.